Hi everyone, it's Mindy Eggen and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I have a ton of inspiration to share with you featuring the new February 2025 release from Hero Arts. Now, today I'll be creating with the card kit and also the fancy dies for February 2025, but be sure to stick around to the end where I'm sharing some bonus cards featuring some of the other club kits, and then I have a special announcement, so be sure to stick around to the end. First, I want to take you through a quick walkthrough of the products. So, this is the Fancy Die of the Month for February 2025. Lots of potted flowers and pots that you can put your flowers in. We have the clear set and dies. So, that's a clear stamp set with coordinating dies for all of the images and the sentiments. Then we have the layering stencil, which is always one of my favorites. It creates this beautiful bouquet of daffodils. Then we have the cling background stamp, which is burlap. And for the card kit, it is packed with amazing products. So, first we have this smaller 4x6 stamp set with sentiments. It also has like that airplane flying through the sky and a balloon. Then we have a large stamp set, one of my absolute favorites, which is the Heroscape, and it creates a beautiful garden of tulips. Then there are coordinating dies, so you can cut your tulips out. Also has dies for some of those sentiments. And then we have this background stamp that creates like this swirling clouds background, super pretty. And look at these word dies. How amazing. You have hey there, thanks, smile, and miss you, plus dies for the airplane, the balloon, and the additional sentiments. Now, you can sign up for individual clubs or you can sign up for the whole studio. And if you do, you get this bonus item with your studio. Now let's go ahead and start creating some cards because I have a lot to get through in the video. I did speed parts of this up because it is quite a bit and I wanted you to see as much of the process as I could show you. So I'm starting by stamping out the Heroscape. I'm starting with the first layer of it, which is the most solid area. And I started out by stamping it with mist ink. So this is going to be my lightest shade. Then I lined up the next layer of the stamp, which is going to create some details in my leaves. And this one I stamped in Arctic ink. Now I have color swatches of all my inks and I constantly refer back to them to see what colors would be lightest and what would layer on top of it best. So those are the two colors that I chose. Now I lined up the tulips. This first layer of the tulips, again, the most solid area, I stamped in pale tomato. And then I'm going to stamp the next layer of it with, I think it was crimson ink. And you can see that I'm switching my cardstock out. I am actually going to be stamping these 4 times. And the reason that I do that is in case I mess up on one of them, I still have 3 more to work with. And in full disclosure, I did actually kind of mess up on layering up one of my tulips. I realigned it, stamped again, but honestly, towards the end, I didn't even pay attention to if it wasn't aligned properly. They all just kind of work together, and when you start putting the scene together, you don't even notice those little imperfections. With the lightest colors for the leaves, I did stamp most of those, I think, twice. Some of the tulips I stamped twice, just depending on how intense I wanted it. And then it might look a little funny at first, but wait until the inks dry back and they create just this gorgeous color assortment. And the reason I chose the Arctic and the Mist ink is I wanted more, I didn't want it to be so vibrant green. I wanted something a little bit softer. So I trimmed those panels in half and I'm die cutting it out with the coordinating die. Now, again, I did mess up on one of these where the white for the outline was showing a little bit more on one side than the other. But again, I didn't even pay attention to that in the end once I started putting my cards together. So please look past any of your imperfections. Now, when I started or after I die cut everything, I'm trimming off the bottom and that is going to release my panel. So all I have then is that border of tulips. Now I can start kind of building my scene and I'm going to start by framing the design. I planned on having tulips at the top and the bottom, and I'm creating a frame using the nesting rectangles from Hero Art. I'm lining this up on some white cardstock, making sure that my borders are even all the way around, and then I die cut that out and set that off on the side. I also went ahead and die cut out one of the sentiments, and this is the word thanks. It's this really nice kind of billowy look to it, which is fun with the cloud background that's included in the kit. I started by ink blending it with the pale tomato ink, And I did start coming in at the bottom with the crimson, but that just wasn't dark enough for me. So I came in with cranberry ink just right down towards the bottom to have kind of that ombre effect. I had die cut out multiples of the word, and I'm going to layer them together with my liquid glue to build the dimension. After I stack these together, I'll set something heavy on it for a second to sit. And for the tulips, the two borders that I created that I'll use for this card project, I'm going to layer the back of them with some foam tape to kind of pop them up a little bit. This would also make a really pretty shaker card. I'm really into shaker cards right now. I just didn't do it for today's video, but I layered the back of these with some foam tape and adding them to a piece of white cardstock that is cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm also going to pop up that frame a little bit, and I didn't want it to be as high as my tulips. So instead, I grabbed some thin foam squares, I trimmed them down and added them to the back of the frame. And then I'll add that over the top of my tulips to kind of hide the edges a little bit because I did scooch the tulips in towards the center a little bit. So I'm going to hide those edges with that frame. I did also add some of those thin foam squares behind the word thanks just to give it a little bit of extra lift to kind of be flush with my tulips. Now, I know I'm showing a lot in the video today. I have extra things that I want to share with you at the end. So, as far as the supply list goes down in the video description, I'll link all of my supplies, but I will mark like with a star or something the products that I'm actually using for the cards that I'm creating in the video. So that full supply list will be down below in the video description and also over on my blog, along with all of the pictures as well. Now, I decided that I wanted to stamp a sentiment on this card project instead of doing any heat embossing, which I know can be a little scary, but I used this smaller greeting that's off of the card kit, and I'm stamping that in the intensified black ink. Now, the key to that is just to make sure you're not getting any excess ink on the door of your Misty. So I have the card that I created just now in the video, and then this was the first card I created. So kind of my idea or inspiration where I had heat embossed a sentiment underneath that larger die cut sentiment. So either way, it looks great. Now I want to create another card, and this time I want to use that kind of swirling cloud background that's in the card kit. So I have that background stamp in my Misty platform. It is a red rubber stamp, so you'll need to remove the foam insert. I put a little bit of repositionable tape behind my cardstock and placed that over the stamp set and then picked it up with the back of the Misty. And now I am inking up that stamp with dusty blue ink. I'm going to stamp it twice to make sure I get a really nice clean impression. I kind of practiced with some colors before. I started with maybe an Arctic or the Mist ink, but then I remembered I used that for my tulips, and so I didn't want that to blend together too much. So the dusty blue was a great choice. I'm going to create a window for my scene using the Arches Infinity die. So again, I line that up over white cardstock, centering that as best as I can, just eyeballing it, holding that down with low tack tape, and then running that through my die cut machine to create the window. And I just love how this looks. Seriously, Heroscapes are my absolute favorite type of stamp set from Hero Art. So when I saw this card kit, I was really excited. I do want to pop up the frame, but first I'm going to add my tulips behind my window right away. So I added a little bit of liquid glue to the back of my window and then also to the bottom of my tulips, kind of secured that down. And then I'll just trim off any excess that might be overhanging. Then I'll be able to line the back of this with that same foam tape. So you can use any type of foam tape that you have if you want to pop your window up. I happen to be using the one from Altenew. It just seems to be the perfect thickness for me where it's not super high and too bulky, but it's just enough to add that lift. So I did line the entire back of that window so I don't have any saggy areas in my window. Line the whole back of that with it, and then remove the backing and added that to the front of my card panel. For the sentiment, I am using Miss You. It fit perfectly within that window frame. Again, these I don't know if I want to call them bubble letters, but they do kind of remind me of like when an airplane is flying through the sky and it kind of leaves the message in the air. But I did use the same technique for Miss You as I did with the thanks that I used earlier. So same reds, same concept, and then layered it together to build up the dimension. And again, last minute decision, decided to use one of these smaller sentiments, so I just placed my panel in my Misty tool and carefully inked that up with the intensified black ink and stamping that underneath. So I have Miss You so, so much. And then I also could not resist adding a small little butterfly down in the bottom. All right, that is card project number 2. So now I'm going to move on to one more card that I want to create with you for in the video. And this one is using the fancy die of the month. So I did a bunch of die cutting off screen. These are just some gorgeous flowers that I'm going to have kind of propped in front of a window. I started these flowers with, I think it was ultra pink cardstock and maybe passion flower. And then I will ink blend them with various colors to just give it a little bit more dimension. I think that first color I used was raspberry jam, and then I think I brought in amethyst for the purple, and now for the white, I am using either the mist or the Arctic. But you can see I also cleaned up my sticky mat, so I didn't transfer any of those dark colors onto my white flowers. I also die cut out a bunch of stems and leaves to add to my flowers. And I think this one, I'll have to double check. I'll list it down below in the video description what cardstock that I used, but I'm pretty sure I used like the Green Hills or the Fresh Lawn ink to add a little bit of dimension. And the small blending brushes really come in handy for that. Then I can start kind of building my flowers. I actually didn't cut enough of the straight stems, so I'm going to use the curved stems and just adjust a little bit. That actually comes in handy because then I can kind of have those flowers kind of curving to either the right or the left. But this was so beautiful, and it just reminds me of spring because I think my mom has these kind of flowers in her garden. So it was just a really pretty assortment to create. And I'm just using a little bit of liquid glue on the black on the back and adding them to those green stems. The background that I'm going to use for this particular card design with the flowers is going to be using the burlap background stamp, which is the Cling of the Month for February 2025. This one again, I used, gosh, it's either Mr. Arctic. I can never remember because they're so close to each other. But I did kind of a tone on tone stamping. I'm going to stamp the entire background with that. You can see I'm just kind of really being a little careless with my ink pad. And the reason I did that is I wanted this to be kind of sporadic, kind of artistic looking in the background. I mean, it's burlap, so it doesn't have to be completely perfect. Now, once I have that stamped down, I'm going to trim another window out of that using the Arches die. And the thought I had for this was to create kind of a windowsill for my flowers. So in that die set in the fancy die of the month, it does have a couple different pots. You can do pots or you can do these planters that would sit in front of your window. And I did that out of a brown cardstock. I'm going to start layering my flowers behind it. I just add a little bit of liquid glue down towards the bottom of the stems, and then I can kind of maneuver them however I want the flowers to arrange. So I do have that bright pink one right in the center, and then the rest of them are just going to be kind of cascading out to the right or the left. And I do end up adding some more in there just because I really wanted this to be nice and full. And because these are kind of at varying heights, I wanted some to be higher than the other. I did have some stems sticking out at the bottom, so I trimmed those off. Now, when I was gluing it, you could really see like the skinny lines of the stems. So I do have another planter die cut out, and I'm going to add a little bit of ink to the sides and to the bottom. And then I'm going to layer this on top of my planter using some foam squares. So not only is going to add lift and dimension to my planter, but it is also going to kind of hide those marks from when I was gluing the skinny stems to the back. So most of my components are ready for the card project. And actually, once I was kind of looking at it, that flower pot would look just beautiful on white cardstock too. So you don't always have to stamp a window or a background. I did add foam tape behind my window, added that to the front of my white card panel, and then just trimmed off any of that excess. And here's where I decided I wanted to really fill my planter. So I'm taking some of those extra pieces that I have and adding a little bit of liquid glue to the bottom of it and just kind of tucking it in the background. Now, because my window is popped up, I do need to kind of pop up my planter a little bit. This part was probably the most time consuming part of it because I did have to trim I can't talk. I did have to trim down some foam tape and kind of hide them behind the stems and the flowers, but I'm really glad I did it because I do prefer my die cut pieces popped up. Now, I do plan on having the bottom of my planter kind of overlapping the window. So I just added the foam tape to the top of the planter, a liquid glue to the bottom, and then I can add that into my window. So we now have this window with a beautiful assortment of flowers. Totally reminds me of spring. Then I have a sentiment that I already had previously stamped out. This is from the Clear Set and Dies in the Month. and I just placed that right over the top of my flowers and let something heavy sit on that for a minute. It was just a beautiful script. It was skinny enough where the flowers are kind of drawing your attention into the sentiment, but yet nothing is overpowering the other, at least in my opinion. Now I have some bonus content for you. So I do have some other projects listed over on my blog. This one is featuring the clear stamp and die of the month, which I put on top of a hexagon and then paired it with the brick wall stencil. I did some tone on tone ink blending and also some white splatters in the background. Then we have the layering stencil for February 2025, which creates this beautiful set of daffodils. And I hope you'll join me here on my YouTube channel where I plan on going live on Wednesday, February 5th, 2025, creating with this layering stencil of the month. So I hope you'll join me for that. And then I have a couple cards that I created using the burlap background. So one is super bright and colorful where I stamped over the top of it in black. But this one, I used my gel press to create kind of this random background with blues and greens and then heat embossed with iridescent gold embossing powder. This one is also just kind of using a rubber brayer to splash some color on and then stamping it in black and using the sentiments from the card kit. Okay, friends, that was a lot, but I had so much fun creating with this month's kits. If you're interested in any of those that I had used today in the video, they will be linked down below in the video description. As far as the cardstock and inks, I'm going to put a star in front of the ones that I used in the video, but I will list out the full supplies that I used if you're interested in anything. Again, join me on Wednesday, February 5th, where I will be creating live with the layering stencil. Thanks so much for joining me, and here is another video I think you might enjoy.